I was enjoying a quiet Saturday morning at my lake cabin, the kind of peaceful day you dream about all week. Birds were chirping, coffee was hot, and the lake was still. That was until I noticed a group of loud strangers splashing around in my private dock area like it was a public pool. I didn't recognize a single face. Turns out they weren't lost hikers or tourists. They were guests of my neighbor, Karen, who's also the head of our lovely HOA. I politely asked them to leave, reminding them this was private property and not part of the shared lakefront. They shrugged me off like I was the one trespassing. A few minutes later, Karen storms down the hill yelling about HOA rights and how her guests can use the lake whenever they want. When I told her that wasn't true and reminded her that the dock sits entirely on my land, she didn't back down. She called the cops. I stood there, stunned, watching her dial with that smug look like she'd just won something. But here's the thing. Calling the police was the worst decision she could have made, because what happened next flipped the whole situation upside down. This wasn't just a neighborly dispute anymore. It was about boundaries, ownership, and respect. And the law. Well, let's just say it wasn't exactly on Karen's side, but the way it unfolded. That's the part you're not going to believe. The cops showed up about 15 minutes later. Two cruisers rolled down the gravel road, tires crunching loud against the rocks as Karen stood there waving them in like they were her personal backup. I stayed calm, arms crossed, waiting on my porch with every document I needed, ready to go. The officers approached and asked what the issue was, and of course, Karen jumped in first, ranting about how I was aggressive, how I threatened her guests, and that I was breaking some made-up HOA rule about lakefront sharing. I calmly asked the officers if I could explain my side. I told them the truth. The lake cabin and dock had been in my family for generations. It's on private land, and there are boundary markers clearly showing that. I even had the original deed and a printed map from the county showing exactly where my property ends and the public space begins. Karen, on the other hand, had nothing but a printout of the HOA guidelines, which, funny enough, didn't include my property because I'm not part of the HOA at all. That's when things started to get interesting. One of the officers raised an eyebrow and said, "Wait, you're not even in the HOA?" Karen went pale. The moment hit like a cold gust of wind. She'd dragged cops onto land she had no authority over. But instead of backing down, she doubled down, and that's when things really began to unravel. Karen, flustered and clearly not expecting to be questioned, insisted that even if I wasn't part of the HOA, community courtesy should still apply. She claimed her guests had every right to enjoy the lake and that I was just being difficult. The officers exchanged a look, clearly unsure what they were supposed to enforce. One of them asked again, "So you're saying this man owns this land, isn't in the HOA, and has signs posted warning against trespassing?" Karen muttered something about how the signs looked temporary and not legally worded. Meanwhile, her guests stood awkwardly near the waterline, towels in hand, avoiding eye contact. One guy even whispered an apology to me under his breath. It was obvious they didn't know they were swimming on private property, and I wasn't mad at them. My issue was strictly with Karen, who had started treating the lake like her personal resort. Then came another twist. One of the officers stepped away to make a call to verify the property lines, and while he was gone, Karen leaned in close and hissed, "You don't know who you're messing with." That's when I realized this wasn't just about swimming or lake access. It was about control. She was used to people backing down. I was not one of them. And as the call wrapped up and the officer returned with new information, I could see the shift in his expression. Whatever he'd just heard wasn't going to go in Karen's favor. But she had one more move up her sleeve. The officer took a deep breath and said, "We just confirmed this entire lakefront, including the shore where those guests were. Swimming is privately owned by you. Karen froze. Her confident smirk disappeared as fast as it came. But before anyone could say another word, she blurted out, "That can't be right. I've lived here for 10 years, and we've always used this part of the lake." Her voice cracked slightly, panic creeping in. I stayed quiet, just watching her unravel. One of her guests backed away toward their car, clearly wanting no part of what was unfolding. The other officer, who'd mostly stayed silent, finally spoke up. "Ma'am, using it for years doesn't make it yours. You can't send people onto land that doesn't belong to you." That hit Karen like a brick. Her face turned red. She tried to recover, throwing around terms like community easement and historical access. But none of it stuck. That's when she pulled out her phone, not to call a lawyer, but the HOA president. She started whispering into the phone like she was plotting something bigger, something meant to silence me or make me regret standing my ground. I couldn't hear every word, but I caught enough: "Make his life hard. He'll wish he never bought that cabin, and we'll shut him down." The cops heard it too. Their eyes locked with mine. The tension thickened. This wasn't just about trespassing anymore. Something much bigger was about to break loose, and I had no idea how deep it really went. I could feel the shift in the air the moment Karen ended that whispered call. She looked up, no longer rattled but calculated, like she had something planned. Within an hour, I noticed a white SUV from the HOA parked near my driveway, and a man in a blazer walked up like he owned the place. "We've had some complaints," he said, not bothering with a greeting, "about loud noise, unauthorized fencing, and improper signage on your dock." I knew immediately it was retaliation. None of that was true. I hadn't had visitors in days, and my dock had been inspected and approved when I first bought the property. But it wasn't about the rules. It was about control. And Karen. She wasn't just a nosy neighbor. She was on the HOA board and clearly pulling strings behind the scenes. Later that evening, I received a formal letter taped to my cabin door from the HOA, stating they'd be conducting a property compliance inspection in 48 hours. I had no doubt they were digging for any excuse to find me, harass me, or worse, strip me of my rights to use my own lakefront. That's when things took a darker turn. My security cameras caught a few of Karen's guests walking near my boat dock late at night, trying to disable one of the cameras. What were they trying to hide? And why now? Know it yet. But the conflict had only just begun, and the next move wasn't going to be mine. 2 days later, the HOA inspection. Team showed up with clipboards, fake smiles, and a clear agenda. I greeted them calmly, already one step ahead. What they didn't know was that I'd spent the last 48 hours compiling legal documents, video footage, and boundary maps showing that not only was my lake cabin fully up to code but the shoreline they were so eager to control didn't legally fall under HOA jurisdiction. The property line ended several feet before the dock even began, as they walked around taking pictures and whispering. I invited the local sheriff, who happened to be a longtime family friend, to swing by. When he arrived, Karen's face dropped. She must have assumed she had control over the situation, but the sheriff didn't come for me. He came to serve Karen and the HOA with a cease and desist order for harassment and trespassing. The look on her face was pure disbelief. Then came the twist. As the sheriff explained the situation to the group, one of Karen's own guests stepped forward, her nephew. Apparently, admitted to trying to tamper with my cameras. He thought it would be funny and didn't expect legal consequences. That confession, caught on my security audio, sealed the deal. Karen stormed off, humiliated and speechless. The HOA board quickly backpedaled, offering apologies and promising to review internal conduct. But the damage was done. I had protected my lake property, exposed their misuse of power, and made it clear wasn't the one to mess with. After that day, things around the lake changed. The HOA backed off completely, and Karen disappeared from all meetings. I never heard her loud voice echo across the water again. The board sent a formal letter apologizing for their actions and confirmed that my property, along with the dock and surrounding shoreline, was officially removed from their enforcement zone. I framed that letter and hung it inside the cabin, just as a quiet reminder of what standing your ground can accomplish. The summer continued peacefully after that. My wife and I finally got to enjoy the lake like we used to, fishing early in the morning and watching sunsets without the stress of unwanted guests or surprise inspections. A few of the more reasonable neighbors even came by to say they were sorry for not speaking up sooner. One of them offered to help fix the trail bridge leading to the dock. I guess the whole neighborhood realized just how quickly things had escalated, and no one wanted more drama. What stuck with me most was the sheriff's words before he left that day. He said, "You handled this the right way, calm, prepared, and with proof." And he was right. It wasn't about yelling or causing a scene. It was about protecting what was mine, legally and fairly. So if you're ever in a situation like this, remember, know your rights, stay calm, and don't let intimidation win. Sometimes the quietest offense makes the loudest impact.